if I may. Sure. And what we should be doing in the next LIS. Joining me is, it's presented as Sonny Varadan, the CIO for Sonora Quest Laboratories. Sonny, I'll let you share a little bit about yourself and your impressive operation.
No, again, thank you for attending the last session of the day before you head to the airport or wherever you're going. Because I got to bail right at 2:20. I got a flight to catch. So Sonny Varadan, been with Sonora Quest, and I'm actually the Chief Information Officer of Sonora Quest and Laboratory Science of Arizona. Sonora Quest is the commercial arm, if you will, owned by Banner Health at 51% is a joint venture, and Quest Diagnostics 49%. So we are a joint venture. I believe we are the biggest Quest joint venture. We're based out of Phoenix, and for the Laboratory Science of Arizona, it's Banner's 34, 35 hospitals, I'm afraid to say, because Megan's sitting right there. She's the COO, maybe 36, I don't know. Every time I turn around, there's a new hospital. And we also manage the 35, 36 Banner hospital laboratories. So we play a role in there too. Think of the model as Sonora Quest serves as the reference lab for Banner. Banner serves as a reference, Quest serves as a reference lab for Sonora Quest, things we cannot do in our lab. On the Sonora Quest, we have 70 plus patient service centers. We actually have 78. We have closer to 500 in-office phlebotomists, because Arizona is one of those states where you can have an in-office phlebotomist. It's got its good and bad, when you have the IOP model. And it's not 300 as long, it's actually 500. So that's why I wanted to correct that. And we do approximately 33,000 recs in the Sonora Quest world, which think of a rec as a patient. So that's how many we do, which totals up to around 90,000. We do 32,000 requisitions, which is 90 million tests a year. So we're a pretty sizable organization, but we are geographically landlocked. We can only operate in the state of Arizona, because think of us as Quest in Arizona, Quest Diagnostics in Arizona. And been in this industry for quite a long time now. I've been coming to this conference since 2006 or 7. On and off. So worked in healthcare, both on the health system side as well as now purely commercial laboratory.
So with your permission, I'll introduce myself. I'm Gilad Brand, the Chief Business Development Officer for LabOS. We are the LIS vendor provider for Sonora Quest, other than some other commercial laboratories here in the US. I myself have a background in programming, look at myself a bit as a veteran in the LIS space. I started off as a programmer through implementation project managers, and then with the company for 20 years. A fun fact, I was actually in 2014 on site at Sonora Quest when we launched our first, I think it was the clinical lab on-prem installation. I was on site as a programmer, providing on-site support, and other than to glorify myself, I bring this up because I feel this to emphasize 2 points that we strongly believe in the company. That first of all, it's all about collaboration and providing solutions on site, boots on the ground, working with our customers, the partners, and more importantly, the program aspect of the technology first company, where we harness technology and use technology, and they've always been in the front end. We would have a cloud-based solution, but more importantly, also with obviously our face to AI. Today, we're working on AI solutions and agents all over the board, from those to decipher physician manual order forms, which I'm guessing some of you are familiar with. So we're working on some projects in that area to help just streamline that operation of getting those orders in, all the way to operational relief on the help desk and customer success, where including voice agents to help for basic result reporting and just specimen tracking and things like that, because we believe that the technology should assist the operation, not the other way around. So without further ado, we can kind of jump straight into it with when growth outpaces the lab. I feel, and from my experience, there's an operational ceiling once you try to scale up to that. I would want to say the 25,000, 30,000 samples a day benchmark. What happens then is the lab scale, but the system modifications slow down, and ticket queues replace direct collaboration. And the overhead of making these changes just becomes very challenging, I want to say. So we had kind of that operational ceiling where, again, we want to grow, we want to do multi-site, but just the procedures in place, the staff, the way they're trained, is just kind of hitting a wall. And I would love to hear some you, Sonny, the perspective in that operation, which pushed us to roll, first of all, about the LIS transition itself, which the target was to transiting over and
Yeah.
pickups.
Yeah, so just to lay the groundwork here, right? So there's two types of LISs you can go with. Most of you are, I'm sure, pretty familiar with SunQuest and Sonora PapNet and Epic Beaker. I personally did a lot of Meditech LIS modules and Beaker when I was in the health systems. There are also cost products, commercial off-the-shelf products, and so is LabOS. So the distinction, and I was not here when they made the selection, but it was the right selection, I believe still, is LabOS is more of a customizable LIS. Yes, it's a cost product, but if you want to change, I'm not saying it's gratification, but if you want to change your workflow, change any functionality enhancements, you will get it sooner versus waiting in the queue for a user group meeting and everybody puts their ideas and someone prioritizes who you don't even know. And I've been through those cycles too. Most recently, we asked for enhancement with one big EHR vendor and they said no. I mean, they flat out said, no, we're not gonna do this, right? I personally don't have the problem with Gilad and LabOS, so that's good news. When I first got to Sonora Quest, we used several systems, and we have some slides which will speak to it. And one of the foundational guiding pillars we set was one organization, one application. I carried that from my Epic days, one patient, one record concept, but same philosophy. Meaning our phlebotomists, even a lot of our internal users, were using multiple systems to get their job done. So if you're a phlebotomist, we have a product called Quantum from Quest. You had to go into our website to pull up the lab test directory. You had to go to a different pricing tool to pull up pricing information, which is client pricing and or patient at time of service pricing. It was just kludgy, very, very kludgy. So it's impacted. It used to take us almost 9 minutes for an order entry at the patient. You haven't even drawn them yet. And we also had this concept of you were at the front desk, and I'm talking purely PSCs, patient service centers at this point, where registration was done at the front desk, and the concept we had was called field accessioning, where you would have to print the labels right at the front desk. So by the time the phlebotomist comes in from the receptionist and goes all the way back, you could lose a label. The patient may say, I don't want that test. I don't know why they entered that. And there was no specimen tracking because in our old system, the minute you print that label, it assumed that the specimen was in the lab. So there's no specimen tracking, right? So all of these issues, and with this one organization, one application, our goal was how can we make everybody get on the same platform? Interestingly enough, we started this project in 2019 towards the end of it, and then we all know what happened in 2021 and 22. And then we restarted the whole engagement back in 23, because primarily in Arizona, as my previous boss used to say, we were the safety net in Arizona. We were the biggest lab in Arizona. Again, two major lab players. One is Sonora Quest, one is LabCorp. So we were one of the major players. And we were doing, at the height of COVID, almost 60,000 COVID tests per day, which was crazy, but we did it, and the world is a better place now. So anyway, so we fast forward 2023, we started with this initiative, and more than volume, it was how do you get everybody in a more seamless system, working off of one application, not constantly switching screens for check-in, check-out, and all those things. So that was our biggest driver to get to LabOS.
Yeah, that's very interesting. From a vendor standpoint, the fact that some vendors say no to operational requirements, which we understand are very important for the operation to run smooth, to be able to scale and just give better care in general. My experience, I'm feeling that the paradigm is a bit changed in general in the labs, from IT projects to strategic business decision. Meaning, at the beginning of the past, when I started off, it was more about finding software, purchasing hardware, doing that, and there was kind of a disconnect between the need of the lab and the software or the LIS vendor. Where today we made some strategic decisions in our company just to enable operational continuity. Multi-site scalability is also a big part of, I think, and a differentiator with our system, where we have one centralized database. They touched that to Sonny, back to Sonny's point, where it's had one vision of the one platform to rule them all, if you will. And we've made decisions for, first of all, to enable and also accept modifications. We kind of look at our system as a boutique or tailor-made solutions for these high volume, high complexity laboratories. And to enable the operational requirements so we can develop them to help to do the turnaround. And later we'll also dive into the complexity that Sonny just spoke on the other slides, but also how unifying those all in one centralized multi-site application can just simply reduce times, enable growth, and kind of, again, just scale, not as a buzzword, but really scale. So the right strategic LIS partner, and again, just some principles we believe in. The team, it's not a ticket. We build around your flows, whether be it customizable options out of the box of our platform, and just again, adaptation that sticks. In this particular case, the target kind of was to enable a 20% growth in the daily samples. This, I mean, when we started off with the project, it was to the 30,000 sample requisitions daily mark, but as Sonny said, we've already surpassed that, and I think without growing the headcount or anything like that, just so the system is ramping up pretty nicely.
Yeah, so just to clarify on the 30,000 recs, I did get an email from the US CEO of LabOS that we almost hit the 35,000 tier, so we got to pay more. But having said that, because if we hit it a certain number of days, it's a different pricing philosophy. We get half of those recs from client draws, physicians drawing in their own offices. And then the rest we get from PSCs and IOPs. So that's the breakdown of that. So not everything is drawn by us. So just want to give you that clarification. This slide I put together actually in 2020, late 2022, early 2023. So this may be pretty rudimentary to you because you may be doing all of this in a single platform. I'll tell you that mostly if you're on an Epic system, maybe you're already on it, right? But we were not there. We were not on Epic. We had LabOS and we were working through different stages. But in our PSCs, and we still have some IOPs because we haven't fully converted all our IOPs yet, this is what they deal with for every single patient. They have to go into Quantum for order entry. If for some reason we need to translate a lipid into a Cleveland Heart Clinic's panel, then they have to go look up the translation letter. To look at what patients have checked in, they got to go into appointment check-in. If we need to see a past due balance for a patient, that's a different system we have. It's called PBI, Patient Billing Inquiry. To process it, they have to go to a different window. Just put yourself in their shoes, right? And of course, if they have to do any additional lookups, change the name to LabOS, but their old system was called NetLIMS. They had to go into that. And they had to, if they had to pull up a rec, we had another system called Freedom Imaging, which was a requisition document management system, if you will. This is a nightmare. And for that Freedom Imaging, in 2022, I had 11 to 12 individuals in IT. It's usually not in IT. Don't know why I inherited it, but I had 11 to 12 individuals who would just scan the paper coming in. Think of each requisition as three pieces of paper. An insurance copy, 2 recs, right? So that was the case. So we had to copy it, which means I have to leave my station, go back to the copier, take a copy. And I also have to make a copy of that electronic rec, which the patient may have brought in because there may be chicken scratch on it. For some reason, even though the order was entered in Quantum prints its own rec. So I have to make a copy of that. So that's 3, right? And then if there's an AWN form or ABN or AWN, you got to print those out too to get the patient signature on those. All of this would be picked up by a courier. No specimen tracking because I told you that the minute the label's print, I'm done. It thinks that's in the lab. Right, when the instrument receives it, that's good because it is an instrument-ready sample at that point. But it's you're done there. And then there was a whole after the fact work of taking it in, scanning all these papers. And of course, God forbid, if two of those scanners don't show up, billing will freak out because their prepositions are not there. It was just a very manual, bad flow. And then what we moved towards, and not everything again is in, this is again the organized chaos, you can hit it. This is how many times a patient has to walk up. So if you hit the clickers there, right? So sorry, if you go back one slide. So the patient has to first go check in, go back and sit down. Then they will be called to give their insurance card, go back and sit down. Then they will be called if they have issues with their card, go back and sit down. And then finally, maybe I'll call you for collecting your specimen, right? So this was, again, a very organized chaos. I say organized because we were still growing as a business, right? And we had 3 different positions at every PSC. One in the front, all my phlebotomists, SQL phlebotomists, and a patient financial advocate, because phlebotomists didn't want to have the conversation about money with the patient. 3 roles, right? And just imagine if one of those people calls up. So with LabOS, what we did is we put scanners in every room, and we completely eliminated the front desk in our PSCs. So there's no more front desk. We come in, check in, sit down, have a good time. Free Wi-Fi, no coffee because you may be fasting, but free Wi-Fi, right? And once they check in, we know who to call. You go to the room, we put scanners in every room. We made electronic signature pads, so you don't have to print out the ABN if they don't want it. They can sign it right there. And everything was scanned and shredded right there. We would get literally tens of millions of paper a year. Think about 32,000 to 34,000 patients a day times three pieces of paper every single day, right? So it just adds up really quickly. And so this is the workflow we have in our patient service centers today, where you don't have a front desk. And with LabOS, we got specimen tracking finally. You know, these are things you just assume. When I worked in SunQuest, Beaker, there was always specimen tracking. SunQuest in 2004 or 5, when I was working on SunQuest, they called it smart, right? So it's just things that goes, you assume it foundational, but with the quantum system, we just didn't have it. So what did we do? How did the project become a success? The order processing time came down from around 9 minutes, and we reduced it further to 7.5. Now it's approximately 5.5 to 6 minutes per transaction. We still haven't eliminated all of those boxes yet. We only eliminated 3 of those 9 boxes you saw. We're working towards bringing in revenue cycle management right in there, or billing, if you will. We're working towards bringing in certain other features in terms of payment processing. But it's a journey, and we will get there. We'll get there soon. So auto costing is now only 5.5 to 6 minutes. We eliminated 95% of the problem bags. What do I mean by a problem bag? You all heard of, I'm sure it happens in every lab. You come in, you have your doctor's order, you give the urine cup or the stool cup, they say they'll come back tomorrow. They never come back. That order just sits. We did not have a way to cancel that urine. So it would go back to the lab in the problem bag. Lab had to go through the steps to cancel it because the order is already crossed, and I've already printed the labels at the front end because they couldn't do it right at the front end. So that was approximately, we had 300 or so problem bags a day. That's almost 2 FTEs. You got to go pull up the order, do the whole thing, cancel it, accession it. It's just pain. We're now down from 11 to 5 because we had to stop our rollout on some of the IOPs due to a couple of fixes we're waiting on from LabOS, but it has definitely cut the department in half.
They're on the way.
And, I'm sorry?
This many. The fixes are obviously on the way from the soul.
And we promised our board that we will hit productivity metrics at the PSCs by the end of 2025, and we did it. We actually showed the board how we increased productivity by at least 10 FTEs, which translates into a certain productivity number for us. And now finally, we have the ability to track specimens accurately. One of my big goals when going with this, you always want the shiny thing, was just like FedEx. When you come in, I should be able to tell you on my website, on our patient portal, where is your specimen? Because 70% of the calls we get from our patients, and also 70% from our physicians, are, where's my result? We don't hold any results. The minute it's done, it's to you. It's like a hospital, when you get a call from the floor, Where's my result? Usually hospital the person first out. Don't call me. I'm not going to sit on your result. It should be there. So it's about expectation setting. And this is something we're working towards. We have the data. It's just not a priority project. We have other projects going on, but we can easily publish the ability to track specimens. It's more for internal, but we can also put it up external. This is my point there.
Thank you, Sonny, for that. But just before the next slide, I kind of want to emphasize again, we understand again that upscaling 20% is a major win for the organization, but those 2 minutes or 4 minutes, depending on counting all that whole processing time, when you multiply it and scale it, and each 1,000, 2,000, every time we hit a new level of these daily requisitions, we understand how much time is actually just saved by that for the staff, the personnel, the FTEs, just to focus on analyzing and providing good patient care and not running around with the investigation. Hey, where did this sample go? What's this serum cup sitting here for 2 days, etc., and so on. So looking at the business results, as I mentioned, we hit a 30 sample benchmark back in 2024. As Sonny just said, the good news that they're also sometimes peaking at 35, which again is amazing. That's
Don't send me a bill.
I'm not. That's not my. But again, technically, it was possible just through a unified multi-site architecture that I touched upon earlier. That brought the 70 PSCs, specialized departments like anatomic pathology, etc. But what's also important was zero downtime. But more importantly than the technical and what enabled it is just I believe our belief, the core belief in the cooperation of both organizations, LabOS and Sonora Quest. We work in full cooperation with a strong emphasis on communication, understanding the requirements, understanding the pain points, and seeing how we can push forward. From the initial implementation meetings through all the deep architecture discussions, again, we value the partnership. We work together. We learn a lot from them, and we just try to implement it. And again, the zero downtime here is something I can't decide enough from the crowd reactions. You all know what we're talking about. You probably experienced many of these challenges yourself. We have 24/7 support. We have on-site specialists for implementation projects, and we just work very closely to understand the requirement and make sure we provide a tech solution that assists with that. So again, these are some of the numbers, the capabilities that we've drawn, the interfacing. We don't say no to the requirements, and I was surprised when somebody said earlier that some vendors just simply say flat out no. I don't know if it's a strategic thing, a size thing, but just that's not the way we roll. Would love to, for an example, if you have anything you can.
No, I don't want to add one more thing. The reason also we went with we love LabOS as a partner is because we also have another issue with the previous version of NetLIMS where we would take an upgrade every 2 years. If you're a laboratorian, you know the validation and the time it takes to run through all your scenarios and make sure for every upgrade or even a fix you have to go through. So the promise with LabOS, and we're now down to 2 upgrades a year, and the goal in 2027 is to go to 4 upgrades a year, is we brought in testing automation, which we could do with their newer platform. We couldn't do with their older platform. So when we get an upgrade from them, whether it's the PSC, whether it's GenLab, Micro, it doesn't matter what it is, we've already automated the PSCs. We're working towards GenLab and Micro and some specimen managers and all those departments. We chose a software called OpKey is what we use. You can choose any software you want. And we automated the entire medtech or medical lab scientists or clinical lab scientists, wherever you are. So that 2 to 3 months of validation is now pretty much, I'm going to say hours. It's the hours it takes for the software to run on some servers. And we have a dev, test, and prod environment like everybody else. So we run it in our test and staging environments, and then we push it to prod. But this is testing we can do. And then we also have what's called no harm done testing, which is a subset. So once you do the production upgrade, there is testing again, a subset of these tests that everybody has to run. So that's another 3 to 4 hours or 5 hours of people being awake at 1 a.m. in the morning when these upgrades are done on a Sunday night. And now we've taken that away from the patient service center testing people, and now we're moving towards, by this October, we'll have GenLab, Micro, and specimen management also off of this. So this way, that's a big issue in terms of taking an upgrade. It's testing and finding our own resources in IT, lab informatics, and finding resources from the technical laboratory, right? They all have their day jobs too. Now, this is another one on top of everything else. And that was a big issue for us. But this software helped us bring in another software called OpKey, and between those, we have automated testing. And they do their own testing too, but they're going to start leveraging the tool we have so that they can run another runner testing on their end.
It's definitely one of the fruits from the collaboration and the testing. And we all know that upgrading the LIS is something the lab has other things to do rather than just test the software and make sure no regression and no harm done. But with working with Sonora and their automations, we adopt some of them. We do it on our own internal configurations as well to see that we are still providing the value, providing the developments, and reducing the upgrade testing time. I find that the biggest bottlenecker, the hardest resource to kind of come about when you are at the point when you're waiting for those new developments or just want to upgrade the software. Now, next slide is a little bit back to the numbers. And we'd kind of index price the cost per sample at 100 during this last launch. We started off kind of at 108, but now, as we can see, as the scale grows up and we're doing more, the higher volumes and the cost per sample is reducing. I think that's kind of the definition of that's scaling.
Is that $108 or
They only get $50 or X.
No, it's indexed. This is not priced. Like kind of just as a benchmark to see if we call the right. That would be nice though.
That would be amazing.
Well, I will tell you this. I don't know how your labs are, but the LIS cost in my budget is less than 1% of our gross revenue. So think of that.
Again, it's about leveraging the operation. The key outcomes, as we mentioned a few times, the 20% growth, 70 PSCs, and I think now we continue to roll out more PSCs and converting those IOPs as we can. Again, the staff is more focused on the operation and the work rather than just kind of, I want to say, wrestling with the software. So the bottom line is the numbers are good. They make for a great representation, but the key word is for the communication. You work together, and it's synergy where it's bigger than the other parts.
I'll actually speak to this too, because there were two individuals who came to Arizona when we first implemented NetLIMS at that time, and then we upgraded to LabOS. Those two individuals stayed back. They're actually part of their team, but they live in Arizona and they work in our lab. They work from home mostly, but then they come in when we need them to come in. And that's a model which a lot of other suppliers will not give you, where you have. And so this way, because LabOS is based in Israel, they also have operations in New Jersey and here, but their core development team is in Israel. So, but to have two folks dedicated for us in Arizona, living maybe 5 miles away from our core lab, has been extremely helpful in terms of watching, translating requirements, working with the teams, getting on calls in the same time zone, all of those stuff.
So other than those two of our employees who just, again, it's also a personal decision. They love the lab, they love Arizona, and they chose to stay. We also have another dedicated team of several more people in Israel working on the requirements, pushing it kind of around the clock in a, I don't want to say 24/7 because no one's programming code at the middle of the night, but due to the time differences, we also sometimes leverage that in a very big way where by the time they sent the last email in Arizona and they woke up, they already received that answer because we were working on those time differences. So again, some things other labs should consider about when looking for an LIS partner. I think thank you for all the kind words, but in general, it's just, you need to recognize the warning sign. You don't want to hit that operational ceiling and then say, okay, we cannot scale due to the technology. With kind of, not everyone does those quarterly reviews, understands the projections, and hopefully if when the lab does the good job, they are scaling, they are ramping up, and they can see it coming. The warning signs, the writings on the wall, whatever quote you want to use to kind of just some foresight as to where the lab is heading and how we can tackle some of those challenges within just before hitting it.
Yeah,
Somebody's
I will
done
make a
great on
point there, right? So, because you have to consider not very customizable software versus customizable. One of the biggest challenges we face is because it's customizable software, testing was just a pain. Because what they would do for us eventually may get into their foundational system, but to begin with is not there. So when we take an upgrade on ours, it may break something else because it's so customized and there's only so many scenarios you can test. So the emphasis on automation of testing was paramount for us. We had to have that all automated to the nth degree so that because sometimes what would happen is we would be testing for 3 months, not find a certain bug or an incident, if you will, or right before go live, we would find it, which means we had to stop the whole go live. It's already a 2-year project. Now it's another 6 months and the lab gets frustrated. So we have to solve for that, especially because we are so customized. We have so many different workflows. We change based on lab needs, based on sales needs. I mean, sales needs is really big, right? There's always something they need. And working with some big systems, I still remember as an example, another major vendor or supplier, if you will, and I'm going to go back to 2006. We were operating in multiple states in the lab I was working at, but the time zone was based out of the West Coast. And I had them change it or requested them to change it. They said they'll do it in 3 years because their architecture won't let them do it. So we had to live with it for 3 more years, right? But with LabOS, I don't have that issue. But again, it comes with, it's now customized to you, and that may not get into their foundational system until maybe 1 or 2 releases later. And because it took us 2 years, we were never on their latest version. That was another big nightmare. But now with automation and with their speed of development and them moving to more of an agile, meaning they have a release every single month. My entire software development team, Salesforce or ServiceNow, we do every single month releases. My background is software development too, right? So we wanted to get this closer to that. We have Sonora on the health system, they do twice a year releases. But we want to get to four releases a year, which is what Epic does. Right? I'm not saying I'm competing with Epic, but we need to get there. So it's more of, yes, I can expect something to come every 3 months versus waiting for 2 years, 3 years, or a year, right? So that was pretty big for us.
Yeah, and to that point, these releases or the quarterly releases obviously also hold other enhancements and improvements that we have and we're getting from other customers, new workflows, new departments. Just keep pushing the envelope on functionality. But again, what I believe in the slides that talks about it some more is more than buzzwords and technology. It really is that the support, the collaboration, and working together. So as I mentioned, dedicated support, it's not a luxury. We all understand the lab has operation. Something stuck, they have to be able to call someone and get that assistance. If they have the business side, this sees a new hiccup in the road, or they make a decision where, hey, why are we doing it this way? We have to change this either within the software or a workflow procedure or anything like that. We can get that done as well. And again, customization versus configuration is something you mentioned. Again, we understand that with the high customizability, did I say that right? With the high customizability, also there is just more moving parts and more nuance that want to do. But we also do have a way kind of doing them out of the box implementation or just setting configurations in stone and having it more, I would say, we like to say user proof. That's the term.
And since we're considering, there's one other thought I leave. I don't know where you are in your journey. Maybe you haven't established LIS. Good for you. If you're not, if you're trying to switch, always have your infrastructure be a responsibility of a supplier partner. Because right around, we started out, this was before my time, with my team responsible for the infrastructure and LabOS responsible for the software. But think about a phlebotomist, think about a lab tech, think about a specimen manager or a courier who's using the system. If LabOS doesn't work, they immediately assume it's a LabOS problem. It could be an outbound, it could be a storage problem, it could be any number of internal issues because we host the infrastructure. We have a proposal from them to move completely to the cloud and they'll take over. But again, there's a million projects, and it takes a lot of time, team, and energy to get that done. But we will pull that off in the next 2 or 3 years. Because right now, if there is an issue, it gets reported as a LabOS problem, and then both of us have to troubleshoot. It's like an EMR interface. Well, it's your problem. I didn't make any changes. It's your problem. It's one of those back and forths. So it's gotten a lot better. But again, if you're planning the change, either they host and do everything, which would be my preferred model, is one less thing for me to worry about. LabOS, it's your problem. It's your SLA, right? Versus my team, not maybe reacting at the same speed or not knowing their configurations. And that's one of those things you have to be careful about.
And again, to that point, the company has been around for 30 years. So we started with on-prem application installed, and we have successfully done migration to the cloud. We have a cloud-based web system. We can kind of serve it as a SaaS. And for our preferred older customers, or just we're on, sorry, the companies that have been using us for a while now, when we did on-prem installations, and we had some examples also that they went from the on-prem to the cloud. Yeah, it's a project, but it's a cloud journey. I think it's even
and full fairness to them, they've asked us to move to the cloud. We just are not ready yet. I mean, there's just so much invested in our existing hardware or infrastructure built around it. And we have so many other things going on that this was not a priority. We need to get there.
So this is a quote from the Director of Laboratory Informatics, where LabOS has provided us with the flexibility and customization we need, while never saying no to our requirements. Before we open to just some questions, or do you have any final thoughts?
No, I want to stress on that, never say no, right? Because I tell my team all the time, we can go to the moon. It's just code. You can change it. You can flex it. It's not the end of the world, right? So they have never said no. And I don't think they'll ever say no. Knowing Gilad and Kobe, who's the US CEO, I've never heard that. They'll figure out a way to make it happen. And it usually is within 3 to 6 months based on our prioritization. The one thing, again, watch out for is, because now we have pretty much even AP on LabOS, we used to have no OPATHs, and then we, again, one organization, one application, bring everybody on the same platform. The backlog is pretty long. So as a leadership team, 2 of them are sitting right here in the room, we're trying to truly justify the ROI for these backlogs. Don't ask for a color of this to change so that you can pick this up, or left to right. How are you more efficient? What is your real ROI in this? I mean, is productivity numbers going up in IT, in special management, in couriers, in client services? And we also successfully, because of LabOS's flexibility, and I could not pull this off with the biggest EHR, not the biggest LIS. And I was at a different lab in California. I wanted to keep the client service folks in the same application, Salesforce. You don't have to switch back to the LIS to solve some things, then come back and document your case here, things like those. With LabOS, 3.5 years ago, we went live with our entire client service department is on Salesforce. They can fax out of there, they can read the results out of there, they can document the case there, and we can put all the metrics, and my sales team can look into it. They don't have to go ask, email, none of that. Those reports are all available through Salesforce. And this way, that team also, the client services team, is not switching between 53 different applications. So it's a team across our organization to bring people, if this is your primary job, if you're in finance, Workday is where you should be. Not go to 7 different places to pull your information. If you're a phlebotomist or LabOS is where you should be. If you're client services, you should be in Salesforce, nowhere else. If you're IT, you should only be in ServiceNow. So we have settled on 4 or 5 key foundational platforms, and we try to make every other system work within them.
Thank you very much for the words. And if anyone has any questions, I have some time.
I got 9 minutes. I got to get to a flight.
Just a little.
We're a lab that's considering an LIS shift. Part of my concern is figuring out all the things that we need to remember the system needs to do. So as you were moving from your old system to LabOS, how did you figure out all the things?
So we did what's called a gap analysis. So that was an involved exercise with the business, right? And so they sat and they identified all the gaps. In our case, when we moved from NetLIMS and we moved to this LabOS, it was a cheaper exercise because they filled some of those gaps. A lot of it was already there in their system. There were some from the older system which didn't come across. Maybe because some of their other customers didn't ask for it, but we are so heavily customized. And so we had to bring those in, but they actually did it for us free of cost, those things. But if it's a true enhancement, then there was a cost associated with it. But you have to spend the time in the gap analysis, and your team has to invest the time. The business has to invest the time. Most of my CSAs, or clinical systems analysts, as we call them, they're pretty much, most of them are, we steal from my good friend Sonia, who's sitting in the back, from her department, who are all CLSs in the lab. They come, so they know a lot, but still the business has to be with us when we identify the gap analysis along with LabOS team sitting with us. If you don't do that exercise, and if you're not thorough with it, there is going to be some gaps. And what we learned the hard way is not to, and we're still living with it, is we said, well, we try not to go for perfection, but at least get almost there. But that caused a lot of workarounds. And those add up quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now a process which should have taken you, 3 minutes is now taking 4.5. Luckily, in the PSC, we went the other way, but in the lab, it's causing some issues as we move through, but they've been giving us not fixes, but enhancements too. And that's now on them, right? We need to do a better job also of identifying the gaps. That's the key. And so spend a lot of time on that. That's pretty important.
And I just want to add on, from a practical standpoint, when we do these gap analysis, we'll usually send our implementation manager, project manager, just to do a walkthrough of the lab of the operation, understand the different facets of your operation, mark them down. Sometimes also during these projects, you might have someone who's very locked in the way he thinks something should be done, but we come and ask the question, what is the purpose of this? What is the value of this? And we most possibly already have those features kind of built in the system, and we can just customize and help with that as well. But to Sonny's point, that there's no shortcuts, as you know, meaning we are, at the end of the day, we are a software company. So there could be a business requirement that if you don't tell why this is done in a certain way, we obviously would not be able to just
Yeah, that's a great point, right? This is another trap we initially fell into, but then we got out of it. You're not trying to create your old LIS into this new LIS. And some of the gaps was trying to create that into the new LIS. So you have to have strong leaders who bring in the right business stakeholders, executive level support. You don't have to sit in every meeting, but you have to have that executive level support. And you have to question every single gap. Yes, I know you did it that way. In this new system, I want you to be more productive. How can you do it differently so that you get the right, most efficient workflow, if you will, right? Because we did fall into that trap. Well, I know it was green over there. This button was in the top left. I'm sure there was a reason for it. Like one of my old bosses used to say, always understand why a fence was put up in the first place before you take it down. But more often than not, if it's 10, 20 years, it's time for the fence to be taken down, right? And figure out what's the most efficient way to get there.
Any more questions?
You said you have 5 testing facilities, is that correct?
Yeah, we have a lot of RRLs. We have the main lab in Phoenix, and then we have another lab in Tucson, and then one up, I guess, in Page. There's a total of 4 or 5. Yeah.
So through your implementation process, what was the most time consuming with it? Like the testing of the instruments, like all of that. What do you consider to be the most?
I think the whole testing process is time consuming. The interfaces to Roche, Sysmex, those are run of the mill. Yes, you have to test them, but it's testing out all the workflows, how the screens react, how data moves from page A to page B to C. That took, and then results validation. And of course, pick some EMRs to test the EMRs, because we didn't test every single EMR. The good news for us is we're owned by Quest 49%. So Quest does all our interfaces. All we had to test is the Quest connectivity. And once that was good, and any reference labs we have. But outside of that, we didn't have to worry about testing every single EMR. When I was at college in Santa Barbara, when we went to Beaker from SunQuest, we had to test every single EMR. Mm-hmm. Luckily, it was a smaller lab, but that took a lot of time to get the documentation filed away. That could be your hardest, because the coordination is a lot more with your external clients. If you're purely a hospital-based lab and you don't have those external connections, you're good. But if you have outreach, and that takes a lot of time, EMR connectivity. Lab testing, you're more in control, but clients, you're not.
Yeah. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think your patients were impacted through this, and versus your clients?
That's a great question, right? So I've been through 2 Epic implementations and 1 Meditech upgrade. In every single instance of those, both the ambulatory and acute, we had to reduce patient volume.
Got it.
We had to 50%,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
With LabOS, we didn't skip a beat. I'm not saying that was the right decision
Right. Right.
because it had some issues, trust me, but we did not reduce the count. So our PSC stepped up, our lab stepped up. When we did the lab conversion, it was more complicated. Specimen processing, they saw the same number of 30,000 patients coming in the day after the upgrade.
Yeah.
So, yes, did it have some problems? I'm not going to say no, right? It did. But we did not do what I did in the health system, where we completely reduced our patient count as a PSC, the IOPs. Maybe we never thought of it. It was too late in the process to think of it, but we should have, hindsight.
Thank you.
As we like saying, building the airplane mid-flight.
Oh, I don't do it.
Okay. Any last questions? Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank
for
you all.
attending.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks.